What's up, everybody? I'm Taylor, and on this channel I share my personal recovery journey. I share what's worked for me and what hasn't worked for me. Before I start, I want to thank all my subscribers. I appreciate all the comments and all the support. It's the reason I keep having the courage to make these videos. I am very grateful for all of y'all. This video is going to speak about my experience with how I started meditation. And I want to start off by saying, I've been in recovery for almost 3 years. Before that, I had been sober for several years, but that didn't matter because I was depressed. I was living in my suffering, reliving my past. And so really for the past 3 years, this is the first time in my life that I've actually been able to experience happiness within myself. And so, I didn't grow up hearing terms like meditation. I heard the term prayer. I grew up in a very religious home. So the only concept I knew of a higher power was called God. And the people that taught me about God didn't really teach me how to pray. They didn't teach me the spiritual part that I've had to teach myself as an adult. And that plays an important role in my recovery and why I'm able to meditate today. Because it's a process, and change has many layers and many layers. And when I first started recovery, the first year, I was so go, go, go. I mean, I threw myself into Zoom meetings, at least 2 to 3 a day. I was doing service work, working with people, doing step work. I had study buddies. I had a sponsor doing step work with that. I was doing my own inner work on the side. I purchased all these different types of self-development workbooks and things like that, reading books, doing research on trauma on the brain, addiction on the brain, dysfunction on the brain, and how all of that correlates to mental health disorders, right? So I was keeping myself pretty busy. And a painful experience had happened in my life where I had to really step back and question myself and check my motives of why I was so go, 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 go. Now, before I dive into the second part of what I'm trying to say is that the first year of recovery, I needed to be go, go, go because it got me to where I am today. It helped me build specific habits like self-discipline, patience, coping skills, like relationships. It helps me with the relationship with myself, with other people. It taught me a lot. All the information that I learned about my brain and what addiction does to the brain, it really made a difference of me having this information because it changed my perspective about my brain. Because before recovery, I thought that something was wrong with me. And I didn't realize that there's really nothing wrong with me. It's the trauma, it's the unhealed trauma, the dysfunction, the lack of self-love, the lack of empathy I had towards myself, the lack of emotional and spiritual connection that I lacked with myself. And so it's like my goal when I started recovery was to rewire my brain. And I did achieve that, and I did do that. But I got to a point of around a year of where I realized, hey, I need to face this silence. See, I was chairing a meeting one day and I had chose the topic for step 11. And what step 11 says, it says, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with the power greater than ourselves as we understand it. And so I had typed that step 11 out on Word so I could share my screen so it could be all neat and stuff, and so everybody in the meeting could see it. And when I went to read it out loud when I was opening the meeting, I read prayer and that and really stuck out to me for the first time in my life. Meditation. So prayer and meditation. It does not say prayer or meditation. It says prayer and meditation. And see, my problem with 12-step programs for the past decade is that I would get so angry, and I was so closed-minded before 3 years ago because I was looking through the lens of my childhood pain. I was looking through the lens of my conditioning when I would hear the word God or hear the word prayer, and that would always steer me away from the program because I was so confused as to what my higher power looked like to me, and I would just leave because it was easier for me to run than it was for me to actually stay and face those uncomfortable feelings and to self-reflect and to figure things out like I have the past 3 years. And so I had to really stay long enough in Alcoholics Anonymous to really self-reflect and to understand what my higher power looked like to me. And so that is a main component that contributes to why I've been active and consistent in meditation. Another important factor is I had to change the way I spoke to myself. I had to start speaking to myself with love and kindness and empathy and compassion. I had to start motivating myself, encouraging myself, and supporting myself. When I was sad, when I was angry, when I was down, I had to learn to emotionally show up for myself, and the way that I did that was changing the way I spoke to myself. So that plays a major factor into why I'm able to meditate today as well. So it's like building blocks, right? It's like I needed to build a foundation. I needed to find what my higher power meant to me. I needed to learn how to emotionally show up for myself. So all these things contribute to why I'm able to meditate today and why I've been able to meditate for the past 2 years. Now, this is my personal experience, and this is what's worked for me. I had to start with that year, I had to really take it serious because my brain did not want to come sit outside and be in silence, because when I would be in silence, things that I hadn't thought about in years would just pop up in my head. And my main thing was my mother. I had a major resentment towards my mother. I didn't grow up with her, but she was in my life enough to impact me and impact my self-worth. She was very emotionally unavailable, and so I would always think about her a lot when I would be in silence. And this is what I started doing. So grab your notebook and take notes. I would set my alarm to go off every night because I love the nighttime. I prefer the nighttime, and I sit outside all day as much as I can, but my time is at night. And so that's my special time. And so I would set my alarm to go off at a certain time, and I would set a timer, and I would kind of put my phone like right there in the door, in the house where I could actually hear it go out, like go off. And I just started setting it for like 15 minutes, right? And I would come out here and I would just sit in silence, and I would just observe my thoughts, observe what thoughts kept coming up, right? And I would have my notebook with me, and I would write down the thoughts, because what I realized is that if I'm having a thought and it's continuously coming up and up and up in my brain, that means I haven't addressed it, I haven't processed it, and I haven't accepted it. So it started off with me just coming and sitting outside and getting familiar with the silence, because my brain did not, like I said, it did not want to be in silence because it was very scary. But the more I forced myself to do this, the more familiar it became, the more familiar it became, the more comfortable it became, and the more easier it became, to the point where I didn't have to set my alarm, I didn't have to set my timer, and that's how I built up to being able to come outside and to really start actually meditating. So it's like I had to easily, gradually like slither my way into it, right? And for a while I could not close my eyes and meditate because I did not feel safe. Maybe I shouldn't say I didn't feel safe, but yeah, I didn't feel safe because my backyard was unfamiliar to me. I've lived here for almost 10 years, but during that time I never came and sat outside, so it was like a new world to me at night, and so I had to get familiar with that, with being in the dark. And of course I had my lights on, but like I turned the lights off. Like I come outside every night, and what I would do is like I would come outside and I would do some type of like self-development work in one of my workbooks or step work. I would do inner work, okay? I would probably do it for about 30 minutes. And then when I was done with that, you know, I would self-reflect on like how I was feeling and like, you know, the thoughts that were coming up. I would do that. And then I would go lay on my patio, and I would first, of course, I would turn the lights off, but I would lay on my patio and I would just stare up into the night sky. And that was my form of meditation. And I would just focus on gratitude and just appreciating the gift of life, the power of life. I would appreciate the process of death. I mean, I would just be grateful for life itself, for the trees, for the animals, for the wind that blows. I mean, I was focusing on gratitude. I would be grateful that my heart is beating. I would be grateful that I am alive. I would be grateful for my brain, for keeping me safe, you know. And so it's those little things that I would focus on. And I mean, with doing that and becoming familiar with that, that became my safe place. It didn't matter what painful experiences was going on in my life. My health was really bad. I was being dismissed and gaslighted by doctors, being judged by doctors for my past. I wasn't getting the help that I needed due to who I used to be from my past. And I was going through a lot of problems with one of my children, a lot of problems with my spouse. I mean, my house was chaotic. It was very chaotic. So my time outside was my time, right? And of course, when my children were at school, I had my time, but my days were filled with commitments and recovery and getting my house in order. And so that was my time to be with myself and with the power of life. And so it happened gradually. It happened gradually. And so I got to a place of where I would like close my eyes, maybe for a couple minutes, and I would focus on my heartbeat. And I would focus on my breath, and I would focus on relaxing into my body and just focusing on my heartbeat. Because for me, when I would focus on my heartbeat and like when I would really be in paying attention, majority of the time I can actually hear my heartbeat. And so I would just really practice on scanning my body and, you know, being aware of like how I physically was feeling, how I emotionally was feeling, and accepting myself for that feeling, not wishing it would be different, not wanting it to be different. And a lot of pain comes up in meditation, and it has for me, okay? And when I say pain, I've had a lot of painful things happen to me throughout my life. And of course, I just said I was going through a lot the past almost 2 years now. I've been going through a lot. I would be in meditation and I would feel my chest tighten up, and I would feel the pain in my chest. And I got to a point where I was able to sit with that pain and accept the pain and allow myself to feel the pain while telling myself, it's okay to feel this pain. I accept this pain. I surrender to this pain. And I would emotionally support myself through that pain. And that has been the only way that I have been able to process pain, is by allowing myself to feel the pain. And my entire life, majority of my life, for 15 years, I was numbed out. And even in 2020, when I quit drinking, I eventually became on so many psych meds that I was completely more numbed out than I was when I was in addiction. So when I came off all my psych meds almost 2 years ago, it felt like I was feeling emotions for the first time my entire life. And I already have really intensified emotions. And so it's like I had to get my brain and my body familiar, but mostly my brain familiar with being able to adapt and accept and surrender to pain. Because for me, when I address pain as it arises, right, and I don't avoid it, or I don't distract myself with healthy procrastination, when I really sit with my pain in silence, and it doesn't even have to be in meditation with my eyes closed, but when I really just come outside and sit with my pain and just allow myself to feel the pain and comfort myself and talk to myself, it goes away within 15 minutes. Now, does it come back later on? Of course, it's pain. It's going to come back. That is normal. But then I do the same thing when it comes back. And guess what? Within 15 minutes, it clears up again. So pain is unavoidable. It doesn't matter if I'm loaded. It doesn't matter if I'm sober. Because I know, at least for me, when I was drinking, my brain, my negative mind or disease mind, my addicted self would convince me that if I drank, I would feel better. It would make me not feel the emotional pain that I was feeling, but I would drink and then I would obsess over the pain that I was feeling. So drinking made my pain worse because I was obsessing, I was ruminating, and I was really reacting in an unhealthy way to my pain because I was intoxicated. But numbing never solved my pain. All it did was prevent me from processing my pain. So 15 years living in active addiction, being numb, I didn't process not one thing that I had been through. And I have been through a lot of trauma. I've had many losses that I can't even count. Very painful losses. And I never was able to process that. I was never able to grieve that because I was always intoxicated. So in 2020, when I got sober from alcohol, I still couldn't really feel my pain because I was so heavily medicated. So when I came off my psychiatric medications, that was like me becoming sober for the first time my entire life, because I felt all the pain that I had held within myself my entire life. And the only way that I have been able to process that pain is allow myself to sit with that pain. And today, meditation is my solution to processing my pain. Now, I've had many different experiences when it comes to meditation. I've actually had sometimes I have really great experiences with meditation where I'm just feeling grateful, like I'm floating or something. But there are the experiences where I am processing pain. So I never know what type of experience I'm gonna have. So I can't have expectations when it comes to meditating. I have to accept whatever comes up, and I have to allow myself to feel it without judgment, without criticism, and without wishing that it could be different than what it is, because it's not, and it can't. And the reality is that it is what it is, and that's the reality. And although the reality is painful, that is still the reality. So I have two options. I can reject the reality, and when I reject the reality, it actually makes it worse. Or I could address it, feel it, process it, and comfort myself, and it will subside. And then when it comes back up, I do the same thing. So there's only really two options for me. And I've lived that option of not addressing things as they arise my entire life. And I know what it's like to address emotions as they arise. So I will never go back to avoiding my emotions. It's just that first year in recovery for me was so hard. Building coping mechanisms, building habits, building structure, self-discipline, patience, learning how to regulate my emotions, reprogramming my conditioning, right? Breaking my old conditioning. It's hard to do that when a person has lived a certain way their entire life. That is what their brain is used to. So in order to make change happen, we have to go against our brain. And our brain does not like anything that's not familiar, okay? And change is good, but to our brain, it's unfamiliar, and it doesn't want change because it's used to what it's used to. So like I said, for me, the most important thing in my recovery was building the habits, building the coping mechanisms, building the structure, attending at least 2 meetings a day, so my brain could absorb what they were telling me, right? So it become a part of my new programming, listening to podcasts to help me learn how to deal with my emotions. Whatever I needed to fix about myself, I would read about, I would listen about, I would do inner work, I would do service work. Those things built my foundation. And then I had to change the way I spoke to myself. I had to stop talking to myself like I was a piece of crap. Because ultimately, yes, I have a support system, but I am the only one that knows me better than any human being on this planet. I know what I need. I had to learn to see myself, to hear myself, and to understand myself. I had to learn to show up for me on an emotional level, and I had to stop depending on other people to show up for me emotionally. And I had to learn to love myself. I had to learn to forgive myself. And I had to learn to show up for myself. So if you can't tell, all these things happened in a process, in order. Like I said, building that solid foundation, learning how to speak to myself nicely and emotionally support myself, emotionally comfort myself by positive self-talk. That is my version of prayer. You know, doing intentions, doing affirmations, you know, I can, I will, and I have. You know, I really enjoy doing intentions. And ChatGTP, it's an app, and I stayed away from it for a long time because I didn't understand it, but it has helped me so much. You can type in, like, give me 100 different intentions to help me deal with blah, 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 blah. Whatever you're going through, and you can type in, it will give you 100 intentions. And what I've done in the past is I have printed them out and I have reworded them the way I want them to be worded. So I use it as a guide. So like, there are free resources out here. There's recovery meetings, and if you've never been in addiction, there's Emotions Anonymous. Like, there are resources out here. And that's why I created this YouTube channel, to share from my heart my personal recovery journey, because I know what it's like to suffer, and I know what it's like to relive the past every second of every day. I know what it's like to not be able to look in the mirror and not know who I am, and not know what I want in life. I get it, you know. And so these things that I built a little over a year in recovery, and the suggestions that I spoke about of how I started coming outside and gradually working my way up. You know, Refuge Recovery is a secular Buddhist recovery program, and I've been attending a lot of their meetings, and the reason being is because they meditate for the first 25 minutes of the meeting, and I like that. And it really helps me. You know, I don't attend a meeting every day like I used to, because I don't have to, and that's where I am in my recovery. But lately I have been doing a meeting every day because I recently had a very painful loss. And so when I know I need more meetings, I do more meetings. I know better than to avoid. And so I got to a point in my recovery where I know what I need in my recovery. And what might work for someone else might not work for me, might not work for you. And so my point is I had to tweak my schedule. And I have created a daily recovery schedule that I do no matter how I feel, physically, mentally, or emotionally. And I will repeat this in every single video because it is the main factor in why I'm able to maintain my emotional and spiritual connection to myself and to the power of life. And I do this schedule no matter what, because I've learned my lesson of what happens when I don't do part of my schedule, and I'm not willing to take a risk. I'm not willing to find out what will happen to me again if I go back to depression, because addiction isn't an option for me anymore. And the reason being is because I've learned how to cope with pain. But if I stop doing what I do on a daily basis, that will lead me back to an emotional relapse, which could lead to a physical substance relapse. But today I choose not to, and I have a choice. So I choose to do my daily recovery schedule no matter what. And so I hope this video can help somebody in their own healing journey and whatever you're going through. You know, if anybody has any suggestions on what helps them, I would love for y'all to drop it in the chat. You know, anybody has any questions, please ask me. That's why I created this channel, to provide free resources, free information, and to provide my personal recovery journey to help others on their own recovery journey. And remember, your brain will try to convince you that you are alone, but I promise you that is not true. There are people out here in these different recovery programs. There are people that will see you, hear you, and understand you. But the most important thing for me in my recovery is I had to learn how to see myself, hear myself, and understand myself, and show up for myself on an emotional level.